We are now very, very pleased to welcome a special storyteller to personify the power of the transatlantic alliance. This one is going to focus not on space security, but very human security. To introduce our storyteller, please welcome NATO's senior civilian representative to Afghanistan, Ambassador Sir Nicholas Kay.
Right, excellent. I thought I was going to be introducing Ariana Saeed, but maybe she'll be coming in a moment, I'm sure. Let me just say, you've been hearing about cyber before, social media. I think space is the next thing. Let's try now to bring you down to real people in real conflict. If I can, let me transport you in Afghanistan back to the year 1996. October 1996. I was there as a young diplomat 4 days after the Taliban arrived in Kabul, captured Kabul. I think I was the first foreign diplomat into Kabul after that. And I thought, well, I better go and see the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So I was taken by my embassy to the ministry, and it was in a little bit of disarray. They just had a change of occupants. The old head of protocol there, a lovely gentleman, said, "You'll have to excuse me, sir, the new lot are a little rough around the edges." So I went in and sat and had a meeting with the acting foreign minister, the Taliban acting foreign minister. I had speaking points to make, which were along the lines of, well, now you are running this country, you've captured Kabul, you will be held to the standards of international respect for international conventions, human rights, particularly women's rights. The conversation didn't go very well. Polite, I guess, more or less, but there was absolutely no meeting of minds as I was trying to tell him that if he wanted international recognition for Afghanistan, then respect for women's rights was going to be central to it. Wind the clock forward 20, if I do the math, 21 years, I think. And August 2017, I arrived back in Kabul. The first time I'd been back to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as British ambassador, and I went into the ministry, also very spruce now and well run, and went in to present the copy of my credentials to the acting foreign minister. And she, because it was she, a woman, Adela Raz, who is now the Afghan ambassador in New York, was, of course, extremely interested. We had a very, very good conversation. One of her responsibilities in 2017 was women's economic empowerment. And I suddenly thought, my goodness, you know, this is absolutely the night and day transformation that Afghanistan has gone through from the dark days of the Taliban to the days in now when you have a deputy foreign minister responsible for women's economic empowerment. Afghanistan is full of inspiring and courageous men and women of the post-2001 generation. And NATO we primarily, of course, think of it as a defensive alliance, very interested in military matters, but in its founding document in 1949, signed here in London, it said it is an alliance founded on the principles of democracy, individual liberty, and the rule of law. And in Afghanistan, the NATO mission since 2003 has very much enabled Afghans now to enjoy and to aspire towards the same rights that we all enjoy. The hugely inspirational people include very much the young woman that we'll see shortly, Ariana Saeed. I first met a couple of years ago in Kabul. She's very well known, famous. She hosts a TV program there called Afghan Star, which is a bit like Pop Idol. She's an incredibly powerful performer and singer in her own right. And 2 years ago, when I first met her, she had been back in Afghanistan to perform live in a stadium. As a young woman, this is very, very controversial. She received death threats. She was warned by the security not to perform. She ended up not performing actually at the stadium, but she performed at a smaller venue, and later that night I met her as she'd just come back from that concert. She's very impressive, and I would like you to welcome extremely warmly, so she can tell her story far better than I can, Ariana Saeed.
Thank you so much, Sir Nicholas Kay, for the kind introduction. You've honored me. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before I say a word, I would like to draw your attention towards a few images, and I would like you to take a guess where and when they're from. Yes, as some of you might have guessed already, this was the Afghanistan of 40 to 50 to 60 years ago, when it was ahead of so many of its neighboring countries and even some parts of the Western world when it came to human and women's rights. But then, unfortunately, we were hit by extremism, backward thinking, war, misery, and terrorism, as a result of which millions of Afghans had to flee the country, and that included my family and I. We first had to go to Pakistan, and from there, believe it or not, I was smuggled out of the country to Switzerland when I was only 12 years old. Our refugee case was rejected in Switzerland, so we came to England, where they gave us a beautiful home and an opportunity to grow. After finishing my studies, I decided to pursue a career in music. But even then, I never thought that someday I would return to Afghanistan, and that too as a female artist. What actually opened my mind towards taking such an unbelievable step was the progress and the change being made inside Afghanistan by the presence of NATO, and the fact that the world was finally paying attention towards Afghanistan. So I took my first trip back to Afghanistan in 2010. And on my way back to Afghanistan, I have to be honest, I was very nervous, and I was quite scared as well. And when I got there, I was suddenly so heartbroken and so sad because of all the poverty and the misery and the sadness around me. However, after performing my first concert in the city of Kabul, I felt and experienced something very amazing. I felt joy, I experienced happiness and positive energy and hope. And that made me realize something so important. It made me realize that with what I do, I can actually leave an impact there, and I can inspire and give hope to a nation that was in need of it. So I decided to stay in Afghanistan, and I started performing major concerts in various different parts of the country, including 3 major concerts in Bamiyan. And I performed right in front of the Buddha statue. Yes, the very same Buddha statue that was destroyed by Taliban not so long ago. And these concerts were attended by up to 20,000 people each, which, to be honest, still feels like a dream to me. I performed concerts for fundraising. I performed concerts that were attended by women only. And I tried to give hope wherever I went. One of the major challenges I took upon myself was to perform in the heart of Kabul city at a football stadium where Taliban used to openly execute women by shooting them in the head in the crowds. It's interesting to see a nightmare turned into hope in the same place. And of course, all these performances would not have been possible without the major security and partial peace of mind provided by the Afghan forces who were actually trained and supported by NATO. To share some of my personal experiences in regards to or related to improvements in the lives of Afghan women. And don't get me wrong, there's still a lot that needs to be done in that country. But when I went to Afghanistan first time in 2010, and whenever I looked outside my window and if I saw 100 people out there, for example, only maybe 3 or 4 of them would have been women. But if I look outside today, out of those 100 people, at least 30 to 40 of them are women. Women today have the chance to study. They are working, they're becoming politicians, they're becoming doctors, teachers, and they're even joining the armed forces. And to me, I personally think that these were the first and initial steps that had to be taken for Afghan women to finally have hope for a normal life. Now, I know, ladies and gentlemen, that there are discussions about the international community to walk away and leave Afghanistan, or to potentially reach a deal or a compromise with Taliban. Even though I personally support peace like everyone else does here, but I do not want us to sacrifice or risk the rights of Afghan women or all those achievements or the progress that has been made in that country for the past 20 years. And before I wrap up my story, I would like to take a moment and express my utmost appreciation. I want to express my sincere condolences to all those NATO families who lost their loved ones while serving in Afghanistan. But I want you to know that your sacrifices did not go in vain. That the future generations of Afghanistan finally have hope for a better tomorrow. And before I wrap up, I would like to show you a few more images of the changes and the progress that has been made in Afghanistan. For example, this image that you see, this is actually Kabul city during the Civil War, which is approximately about 25 to 30 years ago. And so is this one, completely destroyed. This is the very historic and famous Dar al-Aman Palace, which was made by King Amanullah Khan, and this was the state of it during the Civil War. This, of course, is the brutal rule of Taliban when they openly beat up, punish, and execute women. And of course, the very sad and unforgettable moment that was seen and heard around the world. Now, once again, I would like to go to the peace negotiations. And as I said, I know there are discussions about the international community to leave Afghanistan. But I wanted to tell you, and by these images, actually, look at this. This is the same Kabul city today. And you saw the same Kabul city which was from 30 years ago, and it's rebuilt. It may not be as beautiful as London or New York or Paris, but this is the Afghanistan today. And this is the same palace. And I personally think that this is a sign of hope and a rebuilt Afghanistan. And this progress has not just been made in Kabul city, but in the other cities as well, like Mazar, Herat, my personal favorite city, Bamyan, Kandahar. Believe it or not, this is Kandahar, where it used to be the hometown of Taliban. And so is this one. Now, let me repeat again. If you leave and walk away from Afghanistan, I think that Afghanistan will return to civil war, where all those warlords are waiting to start attacking and fighting each other for money and for power. And they will not care about all those millions of innocent souls and lives that will be lost in the process. And Afghanistan will yet again go back to being the home of terrorism. And with the last image, to wrap up my story, I would like to tell you that if you forget and walk away and leave Afghanistan, you will be risking the lives and the future of these beautiful children. Thank you for your attention. I am Ariana, and I represent today's Afghanistan. Thank you.